On the day my son should have been laughing with his cousins, blowing out candles and creating memories, he stood silent in the corner of my sister's backyard while the family photographer clicked away. I watched it happen. My 12-year-old, David, deliberately positioned behind a tree as everyone else gathered for what Karen called the perfect family shot. When I tried to pull him into frame, she smiled that smile I'd seen too many times and said, "We're running tight on time, and this spot is perfect as is." And Thomas, my husband of 15 years, just nodded and took his place next to his sister like nothing happened. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Patricia Lee. I was 42 when this birthday party shattered something in me that took years to rebuild. I grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, the middle of 3 daughters in a working-class family that valued kindness above everything. Mom waited tables at Murphy's Diner for 30 years while Dad worked nights at the steel mill. They taught us that family meant showing up, standing up, and speaking up, values I somehow lost along the way. I met Thomas at a church fundraiser when I was 25. He was solid, reliable, the kind of man who remembered to call when he said he would. We dated for 18 months, got married in a simple ceremony at St. Mary's, and settled into what I thought would be our forever home on Maple Avenue. David came 2 years later, a surprise gift wrapped in blue blankets, with Thomas's darks, hair, and my stubborn chin. But if Thomas was reliable, his sister Karen was calculated. 10 years older than him, she'd practically raised him after their father passed when Thomas was 7. Their mother, Eleanor, never remarried, throwing herself into real estate instead, building an empire that Karen inherited along with the family control. That was the word she used constantly, control. "Someone has to keep this family in control," she'd say, usually right before making a decision none of us had asked for. The first time I noticed something was off was at David's 3rd birthday. Karen showed up with a designer outfit from Nordstrom, crisp white pants and a pale blue sweater that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "I couldn't have my nephew looking shabby in photos," she said, eyeing the dinosaur shirt I'd picked out with bright green letters spelling 3-asaurus. David loved dinosaurs, but I changed him into Karen's clothes anyway. I didn't know then that I was already learning to compromise myself. As David grew, so did Karen's opinions. She questioned every decision, from the public school we chose — my alma mater has much better academic standards — to the sports he played. "Soccer is so pedestrian, what about golf?" To the friends he made. "That Rodriguez boy seems rough around the edges." Every Sunday dinner at her house became a performance review of my parenting, delivered with a smile and wrapped in fake concern. Thomas would sit there, fork in hand, eyes on his plate, letting her words wash over us like rain. Afterward, driving home, he'd say, "She means well, she just worries." But worry doesn't exclude. Worry doesn't make a child feel less than. Worry doesn't orchestrate photo ops where your nephew disappears. The pattern intensified over the years. Family vacations where Karen would book adjacent rooms without consulting us, then complain when David made noise. Holidays where she'd set up elaborate gift-opening ceremonies photographed by a professional. But David's presents were always practical things like socks and school supplies. "Every child needs a responsible aunt," she'd declare, while her own children, Mark and Sophia, got ski trips and summer camps in the Hamptons. I worked as a 3rd-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary. Not glamorous, not high-paying, but I loved it. I loved watching children's faces light up when they finally understood long division or wrote their first complete story. But Karen saw it as proof of our family's mediocrity. "Patricia tries so hard," she'd tell people at charity events. "It's admirable, really." The word admirable coming from her mouth always felt like a backhanded slap. My biggest mistake was believing that standing up for yourself meant causing conflict, and causing conflict meant being difficult, so I stayed quiet. I smiled at her suggestions that bordered on demands. I accepted her comments about David's grades, his table manners, his choice of birthday party themes. I told myself I was being the peacemaker that my mother always praised. But David noticed things children shouldn't have to notice. He stopped sharing his artwork with extended family after Karen critiqued his lack of proper technique at age 7. He became quieter at Sunday dinners, answering questions with the minimum required words. Once, when he was 9, he asked me, "Mom, does Aunt Karen even like me?" I told him of course she did, while my heart cracked at the doubt in his voice. Thomas's defense of his sister grew more automatic as years passed. "Family is complicated," became his mantra. "Karen's got strong opinions, but she cares." When I'd point out specific instances, like how she'd accidentally forgotten to invite David to cousin Sophia's sleepover party while including every other grandchild, he'd find excuses. Maybe there was a miscommunication. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe. The breaking point started building 3 weeks before Tom's 8th birthday party. Karen had insisted on hosting, claiming her pool and outdoor kitchen made for better celebrations. "Don't worry," she'd said. "I've got a photographer friend who'll capture everything." I should have known that for Karen. Capturing everything meant capturing what fit her image of the perfect family narrative. I spent those weeks feeling uneasy. Something about her tone when she discussed the party details felt off. She kept mentioning how important it was that everything looked cohesive in photos. When I suggested coordinating outfits, she laughed. "Oh, Patricia, that's so basic. I've got something much more elegant in mind." The morning of the party, I dressed David in the outfit we'd picked together, navy shorts and a crisp white polo. He'd begged for weeks to wear his favorite superhero shirt, but I convinced him that this was more party appropriate. Looking back, I realize I was already preparing him to fit into whatever frame Karen had planned. We arrived at Karen's sprawling colonial house on Riverview Drive at exactly noon. Her manicured lawn was set with white tables, blue and silver, balloons, and a buffet that probably cost more than our last 3 grocery bills combined. The photographer, a woman named Melissa with multiple cameras hanging around her neck, was already capturing detail shots of the decorations. "Patricia!" Karen air-kissed my cheek. "Thank goodness, we're running on schedule. Thomas, be a dear and help Uncle Bob with the grill." She turned to David with that practiced smile. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Why don't you go play with your cousins? But try not to get too messy before photos." I watched David's shoulders slump slightly as he walked toward the play area. Even at 12, he tried so hard to be good enough for her. I followed him with my eyes until another aunt grabbed my attention with small talk about summer plans. The party progressed like so many before it. Kids played, adults chatted, and Karen orchestrated everything with military precision. She directed traffic, managed the music playlist, and kept checking her phone for something. Around 2 o'clock, she clapped her hands for attention. "Everyone! It's time for some family photos before we cut the cake." She gestured to Melissa. "Let's start with the full family shot." People began gathering on the back porch where Melissa set up. Karen positioned people like chess pieces, grandparents on the bench, parents standing behind, children in front. Then she spotted David approaching. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying that tone I'd learned to dread. "David, honey, why don't you run inside and check if Melissa needs her backup camera? She left it on the kitchen counter." David looked confused. "But I want to be in the picture with everyone." Karen's smile tightened. "Of course, sweetheart. But right now we need to capture this specific group configuration. It's for Grandma's wall, and you know how particular she is about her display. Go check on that camera, and we'll get you in the next round." I started to object. "Karen, it's his birthday party. He should be in the family photo." "Patricia." Her voice was saccharine sweet, but her eyes had turned to steel. "As I said, we're running on a tight schedule, and I've planned each shot. Carefully. There's plenty of time for everyone. I looked at Thomas, waiting for him to intervene, waiting for him to say what I couldn't seem to voice strongly enough. But he just shifted uncomfortably and put his arm around my shoulders. Honey, let's just get this shot done. Karen's put a lot of work into organizing this. David stood there for a moment, processing. Then he nodded and headed toward the house. I watched him walk away, his navy shorts and white polo somehow making him look even more isolated against the backdrop of perfectly positioned relatives. Melissa started clicking away. Beautiful. Now everyone lean in just slightly. Grandma, can you move your hand to rest on your knee? Perfect. Mr. Jameson, tilt your head toward your wife. Wonderful. Everyone smile. The camera captured us all. 3 generations of the Jameson family, except for the child whose day it supposedly was. I forced a smile while my stomach churned. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When the photos were finished, Karen immediately started rearranging people for various smaller groupings. Parents with children, siblings together, grandparents with their eldest daughter. David emerged from the house empty-handed. I couldn't find the camera, he said quietly. Karen barely glanced at him. Oh, never mind that. Melissa got what we needed. She continued orchestrating shots without missing a beat. When David tried to insert himself into a picture with his cousins, she waved him back. Actually, let's get some candid shots first. David, why don't you help Uncle Pete with the drinks? Such a helpful boy. The afternoon stretched on. Every time David attempted to join a posed photo, Karen found a reason he wasn't needed at that moment. We're capturing the adult siblings. This is just the grandchildren from Atlanta. Oh, that's just the pool committee members. Each excuse delivered with that same bright smile and cheery tone. Thomas said nothing. Absolutely nothing. He posed for pictures. He chatted with relatives. He managed the grill when his turn came. He did everything except what I needed most, acknowledge what was happening to our son. I finally pulled him aside behind the garage. Thomas, you see what she's doing, right? David hasn't been in a single photo, and it's his birthday party. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I knew meant he was avoiding confrontation. I'm sure she'll include him soon. She's just... You know how she is about getting her shots perfect first. Perfect without our son? Come on, Pat. Don't make this into something it's not. Karen spent hundreds planning this party. For whom? The question caught in my throat. Not for David. He's been running errands and fetching drinks at his own celebration. You're overreacting, he said, but he couldn't meet my eyes. That word, overreacting, landed like a slap. It was the same word he'd used when I noticed Karen had forgotten to mention David's art award at Thanksgiving dinner. The same word when she'd seated him at the children's table long after his cousins graduated to the adults. The same word that had gradually trained me to doubt my own observations. I walked back to the party feeling something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, but a cold clarity. I watched David attempt once more to position himself in a photo with his Uncle Robert's family. Karen swooped in immediately. Oh, David, perfect timing. Could you be a sweetheart and go tell everyone cake time is in 5 minutes? You know how scattered everyone gets. He nodded and walked away, but this time I saw his shoulders straighten slightly. There was something in his posture that wasn't resignation. It was determination. After the cake was cut and sung to, David included in that at least, Karen announced one final photo session. I want to capture the birthday boy finally, she declared, as if she hadn't been systematically excluding him all afternoon. But David shook his head. I'm good, Aunt Karen. I actually have something I need to show everyone before the party ends. Karen's eyebrows raised. Oh? Well, perhaps after this last shot? No, David interrupted, his voice clear and steady. This can't wait any longer. He walked to the center of the patio where everyone could see him. From his back pocket, he pulled out an envelope. A thick, cream-colored envelope with a familiar blue seal that made my heart stop. I've been saving this news, David announced, waiting for the perfect moment. My mind raced. We'd applied to the Davidson Institute Young Scholars Program months ago. He'd wanted it kept secret until we knew the result. The envelope in his hand looked exactly like their acceptance letters I'd seen online. David held up the envelope. I found out yesterday. I got in. Full scholarship to Davidson's accelerated program. They ranked me in the top 1% nationally for mathematics and problem solving. The patio fell silent. I could hear the pool filter humming, birds chirping in Karen's meticulously landscaped garden, the distant traffic on Riverview Drive. I didn't want to say anything during photos, David continued, his voice gaining confidence, because being left out taught me something really important. I don't need to be in your perfect pictures to know who I am or what I'm capable of. He handed me the envelope, and I opened it with shaking hands. It was real. Our 12-year-old son had just earned one of the most prestigious academic honors available to young students. The program that had Discovery previous recipients, including multiple Nobel laureates and tech industry pioneers. Congratulations are in order, I heard myself saying, my voice thick with emotion. Then louder, everyone, please congratulate David on this incredible achievement. The patio erupted with noise. Congratulations, questions, exclamations of surprise. But I only had eyes for Karen. Her face had gone pale, then flushed red. She'd spent the day curating images of family perfection while dismissing its most extraordinary member. She started, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in my 15 years of knowing her, Karen was speechless. David looked directly at her. It's okay, Aunt Karen. I understand now that some people only see value in what looks good, not what actually matters. The photos will be beautiful, the memories will be real, and I'll always know the difference. He turned to Melissa, who'd been quietly photographing the whole exchange. Actually, could I get one picture, just me and my mom, to remember this moment? As we posed together, David's arm around my waist, I felt tears streaming down my face, not because my son had been excluded from family photos, not because Karen had finally been called out on her treatment of him, but because somehow, through it all, David had learned to value himself. He'd found his worth not in someone else's frame, but in his own remarkable mind and character. The flash went off, capturing us together, and for the first time all day, I smiled genuinely. Because I saw clearly now what I'd been missing. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't being included in every picture, but knowing which pictures are worth being in. The drive home was different from any we'd ever taken from Karen's. David chatted excitedly about the Davidson program, the research opportunities, the advanced mathematics courses, the chance to work with professors at nearby universities. Thomas was quiet, processing. When we finally reached our house on Maple Avenue, David went straight to his room to research more about the program. Thomas and I stood in our kitchen, the weight of the day hanging between us. I didn't see it, he said finally. I should have seen it, all of it. We both missed things, I admitted, but maybe we can start seeing more clearly now. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my parents' values. Standing up and speaking up didn't mean causing conflict. It meant having the courage to name what's happening when what's happening is wrong. David had shown me that. And Karen? Well, her photos would be perfect. Perfectly composed, perfectly lit, perfectly empty of the truth that a 12-year-old boy had carried around all afternoon in his back pocket, waiting for the moment when being left out would illuminate rather than diminish his value. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be erased. David had learned that lesson at 12. I learned it at 42, watching him. And Thomas? I hoped he was learning it too, though such lessons take time to fully absorb when you've spent a lifetime avoiding them. The next morning came too bright. I sat at the kitchen counter, coffee growing cold while I stared at my phone. 23 messages from family members. Most of them started with, "Did you know David got into Davidson?" As if his acceptance somehow validated what happened yesterday. But there was one message that stood out, from Melissa, the photographer. Just 5 words. I deleted those photos already. Attached was a single image, the one she'd taken of David and me after his announcement. In it, my tears were visible, but so was my fierce pride. David stood tall, confident, the Davidson letter still clutched in his free hand. Thomas found me there 2 hours later. "I called into the office," he said. "Took a personal day. We need to talk." For the first time in our marriage, we talked without his phone buzzing, without him checking work emails, without him finding reasons to cut short uncomfortable conversations. He listened as I explained how small I'd felt over the years, how invisible David had become, how I'd learned to apologize for our existence instead of demanding our space. "Karen raised me," he said finally. "When Dad died, she was 15. She fed me, helped with homework, taught me to drive. I guess I never unlearned seeing her authority as absolute." "But David isn't you," I said. "And I'm not your mother. We don't need managing. We need protecting." That afternoon, David emerged from his room with a notebook filled with calculations. He'd already mapped out his Davidson requirements, cross-referenced them with our family budget, and even researched part-time tutoring jobs to help with expenses. My 12-year-old son was planning his future while I'd been tiptoeing around someone else's past. "Mom," he said, spreading his notes across the kitchen table. "I've been thinking. Aunt Karen's probably embarrassed, and that's okay. People sometimes don't realize they're hurting others until it becomes public. Maybe we shouldn't go to Sunday dinner this week. Give everyone space to process." How had he grown so wise? How had he learned to extend grace to someone who'd shown him so little? But then I remembered. Children watch everything, absorb everything. They become what we show them it means to be human. Or, I suggested carefully, we could go and simply exist as ourselves. No apologies, no accommodation. Just David, the Davidson scholar. Just Patricia, who's proud of him. Just Thomas, who's learning to see. David considered this. "I like that better. I'm not ashamed of what I achieved, and I'm not angry anymore either. Being angry would mean her opinion still matters more than my own." Sunday arrived. We dressed in what made us comfortable, David in his favorite superhero shirt, me in jeans and a simple blouse. When we walked into Karen's dining room, conversation stopped. She stood at the head of the table, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. "David," she started, then seemed to recalibrate. "Congratulations. The Davidson Institute is very impressive." "Thank you," he replied simply, taking his usual seat at the table's edge without waiting for assigned places. Eleanor, Thomas's mother, studied the table settings, then deliberately moved the name card marking David's spot to the center of the table. "I think our Davidson scholar should sit here for Sunday dinner." The meal progressed differently than any I could remember. People asked David about his acceptance, about his mathematical interests, about his future plans. Karen contributed when addressed but didn't dominate. Thomas spoke up twice when family members interrupted David, something I'd never seen him do before. After dinner, as others moved to the living room, Karen pulled me aside in the kitchen. "I'm reviewing all my family photos this week. I noticed some gaps. Important people missing from important moments." I waited, saying nothing. This was her conversation to have or not have. I'd like to take some new photos next Sunday. If you'll come, all of you. No agenda, no staging, just family as we are. We'll be here, I said, and left it at that. Growth doesn't require gratitude. Understanding doesn't demand absolution. Sometimes acknowledgement alone is enough to change everything. The Davidson program began that fall. David flourished, his mind challenged in ways our local school couldn't provide. But more than that, he carried himself differently. Not arrogant, but assured. Not defensive, but clear about his boundaries. Thomas changed too. I caught him one evening reviewing photos from past family gatherings, frowning at his own absence from moments he should have protected. "I can't fix the past," he said, closing the album. "But I can be different going forward." 6 months. After the birthday party, David received a research opportunity to present his mathematics project at a national conference. He invited Karen specifically. "I know we've had complicated moments," he wrote in his invitation, "but you're still family. I'd like you to see what I'm capable of in a setting that matters to both of us." She attended. She listened to his presentation on prime number patterns. She met his fellow scholars, chatted with his professors, and witnessed him shine in his element. Later, I found her in the conference hallway, staring at a photo on her phone. David at the podium, mid-presentation, completely in command of his subject. "I almost missed this," she whispered. "I was so busy maintaining image, I nearly missed who he actually is." "Not just him," I said. "All of us. We're more than careful compositions and perfect lighting. We're messy and brilliant and awkward and extraordinary, sometimes all at once." That Christmas, Karen had a new photo printed large and framed, not from the birthday party with its careful exclusions, but from the conference. David, bright-eyed and animated, explaining his mathematical discoveries. She hung it in her entrance hall where every visitor would see it first. And me? I learned that protecting your child doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks quietly, but firmly. Sometimes it simply refuses to disappear. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it teaches everyone in the room something about value, especially the person doing the protecting. Years later, when people ask about our family photos, I tell them about the day David learned he could be excluded from pictures, but never from his own worth. About how being seen isn't about being placed, but about placing yourself where you belong. About how the most powerful images are often the ones that almost didn't get taken at all, because ultimately, what gets captured on film matters less than what gets captured in hearts. And that day, watching my son stand in his truth while others looked on, I captured something essential. The understanding that love doesn't diminish someone to elevate another. It expands to include everyone's fullness. Even if that means rearranging how we see, click by careful click. In the end, I'm grateful for that excluded photograph. It taught us all what family really means. Not a perfect composition, but authentic connection. Not a curated image, but genuine belonging. Not selective inclusion, but wholehearted acceptance. David never did make it into those birthday party family photos. But he created something far more lasting. A new vision of what it means to truly see each other. And every time I look at that conference photo in Karen's hallway, I remember that sometimes the pictures worth taking are the ones that show us not how we pose, but how we rise. If David could teach us that at 12, maybe there's hope for us all. To see past the frames we've built, to question the compositions we accept, to value presence over positioning, to understand that being left out of a photograph says nothing about our importance, but everything about the photographer's limitations. Most importantly, we learned that family isn't measured by who stands together in staged moments, but by who stands up for each other in real ones. And now, whenever someone mentions family photos, I smile. Because I know the most significant pictures hang not on walls, but in the memories of those moments when we choose to see clearly, love fiercely, and include completely. The birthday photos Karen took that day have long been deleted, but the lesson they taught us remains perfectly preserved, in full color, in the way we now navigate our family story. With honesty instead of harmony. With truth instead of tradition. With room for everyone to shine, especially those we once overlooked. Because in the end, that's what real family photography should capture. Not just smiles and similarities, but the beautiful complexity of people who choose, daily, to see each other's full humanity. Even when, especially when, it changes how we frame everything we thought we knew. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.